Hi everyone, welcome back to Learn English Together. Today we have Learning English by Short Stories. This one is Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a dear little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but most of all by her grandmother, and there was nothing that she would not have given to the child. Once she gave her a little cap of red velvet, which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else, so she was always called Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Riding Hood, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She is ill and weak, and they will do her good. Set out before it gets hot, and when you are going, walk nicely and quietly, and do not run off the path, or you may fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing." And when you go into her room, don't forget to say, "Good morning," and don't peep into every corner before you do it. "Okay," said Little Red Riding Hood to her mother, and gave her hand to promise. The grandmother lived out in the wood, half a league from the village, and just as Little Red Riding Hood entered the wood, a wolf met her. Little Red Riding Hood did not know what a wicked creature he was, and was not at all afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," said he. "Thank you kindly, Wolf. Whither away so early, Little Red Riding Hood?" "To my grandmother's." "What have you got in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so poor sick grandmother is to have something good to make her stronger." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" "A good quarter of a league further on in the wood. Her house stands under the 3 large oak trees. The nut trees are just below. You surely must know it," replied Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature! What a nice plump mouthful! She will be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily so as to catch both." So he walked for a short time beside the side of Little Red Riding Hood, and then he said, "See, Little Red Riding Hood, how pretty the flowers are about here. Why do you not look around? I believe, too, that you do not hear how sweetly the little birds are singing. You walk gravely along as if you were going to school, while everything else out here in the wood is merry." Little Red Riding Hood raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, and pretty flowers growing everywhere, she thought, "Suppose I take grandmother a fresh rose? That would please her too. It is so early in the day that I shall still get there in good time." And so she ran from the path into the wood to look for flowers, and whenever she had picked one, she fancied that she saw a still prettier one farther on, and ran after it, and so got deeper and deeper into the wood. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked on the door. "Who is there?" "Little Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf. "She is bringing cake and wine. Open the door." "Lift the latch," called out to the grandmother. "I am too weak and cannot get up." The wolf lifted the latch, the door sprang open, and without saying a word, he went straight to the grandmother's bed and devoured her. Then he put on her clothes, dressed himself in her cap, laid himself in her bed, and drew the curtains. A few minutes later, Little Red Riding Hood knocked on the door. The wolf jumped into bed and pulled the covers over his nose. "Who is it?" he called in a crackly voice. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood." "Oh, how lovely! Do come in, my dear," croaked the wolf. When Little Red Riding Hood entered the little cottage, she could scarcely recognize her grandmother. "Grandmother, your voice sounds so odd. Is something the matter?" she asked. "Oh, I just have a touch of a cold," squeaked the wolf, adding a cough at the end to prove his point. But grandmother, what big ears you have, said Little Red Riding Hood as she edged closer to the bed. The better to hear you with, my dear, replied the wolf. But grandmother, what big eyes you have, said Little Red Riding Hood. The better to see you with, my dear, replied the wolf. But grandmother, what big teeth you have, said Little Red Riding Hood, her voice quivering slightly. The better to eat you with, my dear, roared the wolf, and he leapt out of the bed and began to chase the little girl. Almost too late, Little Red Riding Hood realized that the person in bed was not her grandmother, but a hungry wolf. She ran across the room and through the door, shouting, "Help! Wolf!" as loudly as she could. A woodsman who was chopping logs nearby heard her cry and ran towards the cottage as fast as he could. He grabbed the wolf and made him spit out the poor grandmother, who was a bit frazzled by the whole experience, but still in one piece. "Oh, Grandma, I was so scared," sobbed Little Red Riding Hood. "I'll never speak to strangers or dawdle in the forest again." There, child, you've learned an important lesson. Thank goodness you shouted loud enough for the kind woodsman to hear you. The woodsman knocked out the wolf and carried him deep into the forest where he wouldn't bother people any longer. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother had a nice lunch and a long chat. That's the end of the story. If you liked this type of learning experience and you would like to hear more, please subscribe and we can make more of these videos for you. Hit the like button and add a comment below as well. Thank you. Have a great day.